Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sam Haynes, the Commodore of the CYCA. I'd just like to welcome you all to the final weather briefing for the 79th Rolex Sydney to Hobart Yacht Race. We have here Gabriel Woodhouse from the Bureau, the BOM, and also in attendance is Lee Goddard, Race Committee Chair, who's also available if we have any questions for him. Gabriel, if you'd like to come up. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I hope everyone's had a good Christmas. What we have up on screen at the moment is the latest, or some satellite images from a little while ago this morning, where we can see the two different systems moving across south of South Australia, which will bring those wind changes on Friday. Currently, you can see we've got some pretty clear skies in Sydney. There's a tiny little bit of cloud out there, and you can see down along the New South Wales coast, we've just got a little bit of cloud, but for the most part, really sunny skies for the race start today. In terms of the chart, what we can see is that cold front and trough over South Australia and that second system coming in behind it, and that's what's going to be reinforcing those westerly winds through the first part of the race. And when we have a look at the prognosis charts for today and tomorrow and also into Saturday and Sunday, what we see is that cold front come sweeping through during the early hours of Friday morning, and that's going to bring that west-southwesterly change across. Is it back now? Perfect. Sorry. And so we'll see that change move across Bass Strait and Tasmania, but it'll move along the New South Wales coast as a southerly change during Friday. And once we get to the weekend, what we see on this chart is just another series of little troughs and cold fronts that'll be crossing Tasmania. So that is going to continue to see those northwest to southwesterly winds and see some little changes that come in and out over the course of the forecast period. But by Sunday evening, what you can see is we start to see that high pressure system move a little bit further east, and that's where we'll start to see more southerly winds develop along the Tasmanian coast. So in terms of the forecast summary at the moment and what we've been seeing in terms of the model changes over the last day or two, very consistent forecast for the first part of the race. If anything, that west-southwesterly change has maybe slowed down by about an hour or two at this stage. The models are still in fairly good agreement about that, and I'll put some images up in a second around the timing of that. But we are seeing strong wind warnings developing through the afternoon today and getting up to gale, so about 35 knots along the south coast of New South Wales and further south towards Tasmania. And with that west-southwest change pushing through in the early hours of tomorrow, again, it's going to be fairly strong. It's going to be very abrupt, and there may be some gale winds associated with with that change. And we could also see some showers and maybe even the chance of storms developing. Throughout the race, it's fairly likely that we'll continue to see strong wind warnings being issued at times, particularly across parts of Bass Strait and across the southeast Tasmanian coast. So race start, at the moment we're expecting winds on the harbour to be getting up to about 15 knots at 1 o'clock. And once you get outside the heads, it looks as though we'll be getting up to 18 to 20 knots. And then as you make your way further south, we'll see those winds increasing. So by this afternoon, expecting wind speeds of 20 to 30 knots. And by the evening, what we can see, particularly south of about Narooma, is those wind speeds getting up to 35 knots. So strong and gale force wind warnings are in place along the New South Wales coast and also down through the East Gippsland coast as well. So bear in mind that for tonight, in particular, it will be quite windy, and with that we will be seeing those waves pick up, so potentially getting significant wave heights of around 3 to 3.5 metres through the evening. We'll also see that high cloud develop, and then in the early morning is when we'll start to see that west-southwesterly change move through. So taking a look at some of the overnight model comparisons, what we can see is that change is fairly consistently timed in terms of how it's moving through Bass Strait. There is still some variability about what wind strengths we'll see with that change. It's most likely that we'll see winds of 20 to 30 knots, potentially just getting up to 35 knots through Bass Strait. And as we move through the morning period, we see that move further east, and we'll see the strong and gale force winds that in the northerly shifting further offshore. So by about 8 o'clock in the morning, we can expect those south to southwesterly winds moving along the New South Wales coast. We won't be seeing the change be quite as strong along the New South Wales coast. It's still expecting to be around 20 to 30 knots, and that risk of gales is going to be more so across parts of Bass Strait and the northeast Tasmanian coast, as well as down south of Tasman Island. So that's the main watch point for tomorrow, with that change moving through, just how abrupt it's going to be and how quickly it's going to come moving through during the morning, and probably see the chance of some showers and maybe even a slight chance of a thunderstorm develop through the day with that change. Now, through the day on Friday, for those that might be headed towards Tasmania, what we'll see with that westerly flow is some of those winds will be blocked a little bit by the land. So we may see winds tending a little bit more northwesterly along the Tasmanian east coast there, and we could end up seeing some of the winds become much lighter, particularly between about St Helens and Maria Island. So that's one thing to note, and depending on how things go in the afternoon and evening, they may start to turn a little bit more southerly as well. So it's a really tricky forecast for that eastern part of the Tasmanian coast there, following that change moving through. It is still going to be fairly windy, particularly across the southeast waters of Tasmania, with potentially still some strong winds and maybe even touching upon gale winds. Through Friday evening, coming in towards Storm Bay and the Derwent Estuary, we'll still be seeing those northwesterly winds funneling So through Storm Bay and Derwent Estuary, we're still expecting those winds to be a little bit more northwesterly and potentially still about 15 to 25 knots. It's a little bit of a challenging forecast. We are expecting those winds to start to ease off through Friday, but we may end up seeing some strong wind warnings being issued for Storm Bay and the Derwent Estuary for the early part of Friday, but we are expecting those winds to weaken off through the evening and into the early hours of Saturday. So just bear that in mind, that it will be still quite breezy coming into Hobart, and that throughout the coming days we'll continue to see those northwest to southwesterly winds coming into Storm Bay, and generally around 10 to 20 knots. At times it might be a little bit stronger and a little bit more gusty. So that's the other thing to note for the forecast along the Tasmanian coast and coming into Hobart, that we will be seeing some gusty conditions at times. Now, during Saturday, we will have another little trough that will come through, and that's going to then bring a high likelihood of seeing some showers and potentially even some low cloud developing along the east coast of Tasmania. So one thing to watch out for with that will be some reduced visibility, but it is looking as though the rainfall that we're expecting should be relatively light, but it is still going to be wet, obviously. Now, taking a look at the full model comparison charts for Saturday evening, what we see is we continue to see that westerly flow. You can sort of just make out that little trough crossing Tasmania there on Saturday evening, and by Sunday what we see is again those northwest to southwesterly winds persisting, and again fresh to strong across parts of Bass Strait and also down off the southeast of Tasmania. Along the New South Wales coast, we will be seeing some sort of southerly winds that will eventually start to turn a little bit more northeasterly through Sunday and Monday. And what we see here by Monday is yet another little trough coming across Tasmania, and some of those winds turning a little bit more northerly. Bit of variability in the guidance at the moment about the timing of that and what kind of wind strengths we'll see along the Tasmanian coast in particular, but potential to see some wind speeds getting up to 20, maybe even 30 knots at times on Monday and into New Year's Eve. So with that, as we move to New Year's, there is the chance that with this next trough that's coming through that we could end up seeing some thunderstorms developing. It's probably more likely much further north, but we could end up seeing the risk of some lightning around Tasmania and over the coastal waters of Tasmania on Tuesday and Wednesday around New Year's with that next system coming through. So depending on what day and time you manage to make it into Hobart, it's looking as though it will be relatively cool in terms of some of those temperatures during the day. We'll be a little bit warmer moving in towards New Year's. Looks as though we'll have a few showers around, but they will be fairly isolated and passing showers. The risk of thunderstorms is more likely that we'll have that over the water for Friday and potentially Saturday and again near New Year's. But otherwise, fairly normal conditions for what we're expecting down in Hobart, with fairly windy conditions, and maybe even a slight chance of seeing some severe weather warnings being issued over the land for some damaging winds on Friday, with that front coming through. But it looks as though those winds should be easing off by the time you might be making your way in towards Hobart on Friday evening. So looking at the water with the currents, there's little change from what we were talking about 2 days ago. The main difference has been we have seen that area of the southward current move a little bit further west, as we were kind of anticipating, but the strengths have remained relatively similar. And likewise with the one, we'll see those wind-driven currents along the New South Wales coast following that southerly change. But with the sea surface temperatures, with those different eddies that are off the New South Wales coast at the moment, once you sort of see those sea surface temperatures drop below about 21 degrees, you're probably going to be outside of that southward current that's most favourable between Gabo Island and Ulladulla. So just to summarise, the forecast is looking very consistent, particularly for the first part of the race, where we do have those strengthening northeasterly winds today, getting up to gales along the south coast of New South Wales, and we'll see that really abrupt west-southwesterly change move across Bass Strait in the early hours of Friday morning, and we'll then see that move along the New South Wales coast as a southerly during the day on Friday. Once we see that change move through, we will continue to see some northwest to southwesterly winds throughout the race, and with that we'll see a couple of little troughs that will come through, which will give us that variability in the wind, and we'll continue to see some variable winds, particularly along that eastern part of Tasmania through the coming days, because the wind's effectively blocked by the land there. So it is going to be a tricky forecast, and potentially be able to see some of the winds drop out, particularly between St Helens and Maria Island. So with that, I'm going to say best of luck, and I really look forward to seeing how you guys go, and I hope you have a safe but fast race. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabriel. Also, as mentioned, I do have the race committee chairman, Lee Goddard, here for any questions, if there are any, for him in the race committee. With that, just want to say good luck, everyone. Have a great race, and thanks so much for competing. It's going to be a terrific event this year. So I'll let you all go back to your boats and get on with it, and see you on the start line. Thank you.